Okay, 2 Kings chapter 17. We're doing it. We're gonna make it. If you feel fatigued about our Conflict of Kings teaching series, maybe you'll perk up to hear that we're at the end of the road for Israel. Bad for them, maybe good for you. I don't know. We're going to be talking about the last king of the nation of Israel today. We're going to be going over this chapter in the Bible, 2 Kings 17. It's a little bit unusual because it doesn't necessarily talk about a single king a lot. It talks about the last one a little bit. But mostly, it's like a nation in review. It looks back, like, why did this happen? How did Israel go from following the likes of King David, following the likes of King Solomon, all the way to a point where they were actually conquered by the Assyrians and exiled from their land? How did that happen? In case you're wondering, there were 19 kings of Israel. The very first one was a man named Jeroboam, and the very last one was named Hoshea, and you can see on the timeline here on the right-hand side in orange, the last guy is Hoshea. He's the last king of Israel. 19 kings over a span of 209 years. I know what you're thinking. What's the average? Oh, the average is 11 years. Isn't that what you think when you have a range and then a number? Average. Okay, that's Bible math for you. Think about that. For over 200 years, the average reign was only 11 years. That's not that long. There was significant change about every decade throughout the course of Israel. We know that it really was not a great testimony, beginning with that very first king, Jeroboam. So we're going to study a little bit, kind of a macro view here this morning. And I'm not sure that like every point I'm going to bring to you this morning is going to land for all of you. Unlike when we study a king that sort of has one or maybe two themes associated with a single king, we're going to take a step back and analyze the macro view and point out some major points of influence and like how did this happen. So it's going to be a little bit of a buffet, smorgasbord style. So I'm preparing you because if you're like prepared for a theme, you're really not going to get that. But I do want to encourage you to look for like one or maybe two things that you could hang on to that just stand out to you. I mean, that's kind of how I read my Bible anyway. I'm reading through, and I'm just looking for something to jump out at the page at me, and then I inquire further. So as I share these thoughts and these observations from the scriptures, you be looking for that thing that's going to stand out to you. The one thing you're going to come away with today like, wow, that's a significant thing for me. All right? Well, first we have to talk about Hosea. So let's read here in chapter 17, verse 1, about the last king of Israel, Hoshea, and how that transpired. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, Hoshea, the son of Elah, became king over Israel in Samaria and reigned 9 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, only not as the kings of Israel who were before him. Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, came up against him, and Hoshea became his servant and paid him tribute. But the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hoshea, who had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt, and offered no tribute to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. So the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Then the king of Assyria invaded the whole land and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years. So in the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and carried Israel away into exile to Assyria and settled them in Halah and Habor on the river of Gozan in the cities of the Medes. Okay. This is an account of the very last act of the king of Israel that I want to analyze in some detail here. Assyria, as we studied last time when we were talking about Ahaz, king of Judah, Assyria was becoming the major political and military powerhouse in the region at the time. They were the gorilla in the room, okay? And they were exerting their influence here, there, and everywhere. And when they came up against Israel, Hoshea got them to not conquer them completely by offering them a bunch of money and resource. And they made a deal that, like, moving forward, we'll just pay you tribute, which is kind of like a tax. You could think about it that way. Like, of all the resource that we generate in our nation, we will give you X percentage of that year over year in perpetuity. And that's what kept the king of Assyria at bay. Already, can you see how that's not like the heart of God for you? That you'd be having to you have to wheel and deal with the powers that really do want to encroach upon your welfare, that you'd be making some side deals so that you wouldn't be so encroached by them. Well, anyway, he makes a deal with Assyria, keeps them at bay. But Hoshea, true to the form of a king of Israel in these days, went behind the back of this king of Assyria and tried to make a deal with Egypt. This is a significant point. Can you think of any other time when Israel and Egypt were involved with one another? Yeah, quite a few times I can think about. There's like this really, this symmetry almost to Israel's relationship with Egypt, where one of the most significant things that God did in the whole history of Israel was to free them from slavery from where? Egypt. And if you study Israel and Egypt's history over the entire course of the Old Testament, you'll find that there is this very long-term temptation for Israel to want to return back in some way, shape, or form to what they had in Egypt. If you remember, like right after they immediately got out of Egypt, they wanted to go back. Well, that kept happening in different forms over the course of their history. And here we see it again. They're wanting to make a deal with Egypt, which has sort of become a place of familiar comfort for them, even though it also was a place of anguish, of hurt, of servitude. If your life is really great right now and nothing's going wrong in your life, then it can be really easy to look at that and just judge it like crazy. Like, why would you do that? Why would you go back there? But I'll just point you to Exhibit A of your life for when perhaps you have gotten stressed or overwhelmed or something about your life has just radically changed so you don't know up from down. And all of us, I think, have places where we are tempted to go when things get really bad that aren't the Lord. And I don't know if you've ever had something that tempts you that is something of a comfort, even though it has hurt you in the past, even though you know it's not good for you. It's a substance, it's a relationship, it's a pattern, whatever it is. And for whatever reason, when we go through difficult things in our lives, it becomes easy for us to want to return to those things. I find it very useful, actually, when I'm stressed, when I'm going through something difficult, to really make an assessment of where do I go immediately in my heart? Where do I go for comfort? Is it a person? Is it a pattern? Is it a relationship? Or is it the Lord? And of course, I want it to be the Lord. But sometimes things can take root in our lives that we're not aware of. And times like that can be very useful in helping us understand, like, wow, I keep going toward this pattern every single time work gets crazy. But I don't want to do that, Lord. I want to go to you. I don't want to go to this pattern. Well, for Israel, a part of that pattern was going to Egypt. I was joking with the first service that this king of Egypt's name was cracking me up. So, that's his name. His name is So. Makes me think of my youngest daughter, who's almost 2, and she uses the word so in very strange ways. She uses it to emphasize like anything. Anything in which she wants to emphasize, she uses the word so. Like, she'll point at my shoes and say, so daddy's shoes. So daddy's. I'm like, yes, these are mine. They are not mommy's. They are so daddy's shoes. Daddy, so sit down. So sit down. Or my favorite one is, you know in books, like children's books, how like sometimes in a cartoon they'll draw somebody who's really happy, like smiling really big, and their eyes get really squinty. She thinks that's like sleeping. So even though they're like happy, and so she points at characters when I read her books all the time, and she looks at me and she goes, so sleepy. So sleepy. You know, smiling. So sleepy. So king of Egypt. So king of Egypt. Hoshea goes to the king of Egypt and tries to wheel and deal. And the king of Assyria catches him. uh-oh, and makes him pay for it dearly. King of Assyria comes against Israel and besieges Samaria, which was the capital, for 3 years and finally conquers them. What happens after that is the Assyrian king takes the Israelites out of their land and puts them into Assyrian territories, totally foreign place. And the whole idea behind that was they want to continue reaping the benefits of like a labor force or resource that like human beings can produce, but they don't want them to get powerful enough so that they could revolt against the Assyrians. That's why they put them in a different location, because like everything is unknown, and so you can like work them to death, but they won't get powerful enough to revolt. Similarly, in that land, they installed their own people, so Assyrian citizens, to be the governors and the leadership in that land, same sort of thing. They're trying to keep the people on their heels so they can never return to the level of power, influence, autonomy, and bounty that they had experienced before. It's heartbreaking, isn't it? Because folks, I think you can see where I'm going with this. This is a metaphor for our lives on sin. You remember those old commercials, like, this is your brain on drugs. This is your life on sin. This is what happens. The whole idea is to knock you off of your game so you'll never be able to return to the level of life and bounty and purpose that God had intended for you to live in your promised land. A part of that might be in exiling. A part of that might be installing strangers into places where God meant for you to really live. But the whole idea of these sinister spiritual forces, who, make no mistake, are at work in our lives today, are trying to get us to a place where we are in servitude to them rather than making proactive, powerful moves for the kingdom of God. So one of the tragedies that we see in Israel is not just the ravages of sin in their own lives, but the fact that they lost their platform of influence in the nations around them. It's a really sobering and tragic reality of what happens when we allow sin to run rampant in our lives. Okay, so for the next few verses, what we're going to read are both kind of explanations. Here's contributing factors to why Israel fell. And we're also going to read about like what the state of being was that they ended in. Like, where did they end? It was different from where they began. Where did they end? And my purpose in studying this with us this morning is so that we could all learn something about those connection points and perhaps get some clarity for our own lives. So let's read here in verse number 7 as we start to walk through the explanation of how this happened. Now this came about because the sons of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up from the land of Egypt, from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And they had feared other gods, walked in the customs of the nations whom the Lord had driven out before the sons of Israel, and in the customs of the kings of Israel, which they had introduced. Okay, so right out of the gate, we get this explanation that a contributing factor for them being in this horrible state is because they sinned. I've been exposed to, but I certainly do not share, a perspective of like, well, I'm going to heaven, so I don't know, what's the big deal with sin anyway? Like, why is it such a big deal? Well, this is proof positive that if we allow the patterns of sin to continue in our lives, this is the kind of state of being that we will end up in. Now, I want to remind you, how long did this take? 209 years. So God is not some bean counter in the sky who's like, oh, you're late on this one payment, zap. That's not how God works. And I'm going to explain my perspective of why God introduced such a severe consequence in their lives in a second. Well, it'll be a couple of minutes. It's going to be a few hours before I get there. But anyway, we're going to get there. So I'm going to explain that part of it. But the thing that we have to keep in mind that it was a really long time, and God suffered through a lot of rejection of these people, scorning his name, his patterns, rejection of his statutes completely. And then in place of those things, they were doing horrific practices in order to worship and appease false gods. So the brokenheartedness that Father God must have felt towards his people was severe. But still, he suffered through so long before he changed his tactic there. So I just want to remind you that like, God is not trying to whack you in the sky if you make a couple of mistakes. That's not how it works. But make no mistake about it, he is wanting to train you. He is. Because if you keep letting that sin run rampant in your life, you're going to experience the consequence of it. So how can God claim that he's loving, knowing what that sin is going to do in your life, never addressing it? That doesn't add up. Okay. So they sinned, but it also says, against the Lord their God, who had brought them up from the land of Egypt, from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. There's that symmetry. They came from a place of slavery in Egypt, and now here they are at the very end of their nation, wanting to return to that place, basically. This is something that I've noticed of a pattern that happens. Because let's think about the first king of Israel, Jeroboam. Do you remember what he did? He set up 2 golden calves. Do you remember what he said about those golden calves? He said, Israel, this is the God who brought you up from Egypt. What? That is the pattern of the slow influence of idolatry, getting us to question who God is and what he's done in our lives. And if we don't stay disciplined with saying, remembering, celebrating what God has done in our lives, we open ourselves up to being vulnerable to revisionist historical suggestions. Did God really do that? Or was it your golden calf? Now, to you and I, that sounds ridiculous, because none of us probably is confused that like a golden calf did this for me. But you have to understand that back then, that was totally plausible, that some God represented by this golden calf did something. But for us these days, maybe it was, oh, I just imagined it, or oh, it really. Here's one of my favorites. It really wasn't that bad. Yes, it was that bad, and you cried out to God, and he met you, but now that everything's resolved, now you're like, was it really that big of a deal? I don't know, you were crying on my doorstep, not knowing what to do. Yeah, it seemed like a big deal to you at the time. Don't forget what God has done. In fact, this is one of the most powerful things we can do to push off the influence of idolatry and sin in our lives is super simple. It's just thanking God for what he has done. Remembering him. He's the God who brought me up from Egypt. He got me out of that place. So this is one of the reasons why we worship every single weekend. I don't know if you've ever wondered that, like, do we need to do that every weekend? Like, could we do it every other? Once a month? Once a year? What does the Bible say about that? It's not empty tradition to me. Frankly, I think once a week is kind of pathetic. I don't think that's good enough. But anyway, we do that together once a week to worship God. And what are we doing when we're worshiping him, singing these songs? Thank you, God, because you helped me. Thank you. You're my refuge. You're my strength. My heart is prone to wander. But God, you have brought me close to you in love. These are all remembering things that God has done in our lives, and we are articulating them. We're speaking them out. That's very powerful. But I would encourage you to take it a step further. Because most of the worship songs that we sing, they're wonderful, they're beautiful, but they're pretty generic. God, you are loving. God, you rescued me. I would encourage you to be specific. And when there's a little musical interlude in between one of the songs, or we're all speaking out praises to God, that you would adopt in your life a regular discipline of saying, God, you saved me from a fear of my future. Thank you, Lord, that you saved me from being afraid of stepping into tomorrow. And you get specific about it. And guys, I'm telling you, that's just going to be like a wave of pushing this stuff off when you remember the Lord. Okay, verse number 8. They walked in the customs of the nations whom the Lord had driven out from before the sons of Israel. That means the people around them, and the customs of the kings of Israel, which they had introduced. So it's 2 things. Wickedness from without, wickedness from within. Are you seeing that there? They adopted the customs of the nations around them, but also like Jeroboam, he's like, how can I trick Israel? I know, golden calves. They're sucker for those calves. We'll make 2 of them, double the amount of manipulation, and we'll get them on that. And they did. Do you know that Israel never departed from that practice? Every single one of the kings of Israel, maybe not every single one, but the vast majority of them says, and they did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam. And it's talking about those calves. They never got rid of it. So from within, from without. But here's the tragedy that I guess I mentioned this already, but I'll say it again. God had intended Israel to be like this light. And the whole idea is that everybody would be like, why is your nation so awesome? It doesn't make any sense. You're small, you're not that smart, you're not that strong, and yet you're so prosperous. It was supposed to be a question for people to realize the God that Israel worships is so much better than the God that I'm worshiping, and they would come to fear and to know God. That was the whole point. He's continued that pattern with you and me today. See what I did there? Sorry. You're not that great. You're not that smart. You're not that strong. And people ought to look at your life and say, how is that possible? And you say, I know. It's God. Not to be impressed with you and like, wow, so impressed with your life, but to be impressed in God in you. That's the goal here. And they would be drawn to it like, man, the only thing that could explain the blessing in your life, I mean, no offense, but the only thing that could explain it is supernatural activity, like a lot of it. So, man, I want to get in on that because I need that. So when they recognized they had need and they recognized, wow, and there's a God who can do something about that level of need, they would be drawn near to it. That was the whole point. Now, Israel, because of their sin, the capacity for them to minister on that level was greatly reduced. I'm not going to say it went away completely, because that's unfair. I think that's also just not right. But their capacity for being able to influence the nations on that way was greatly reduced. Here's a question we've asked ourselves over the last year or so. Are you influencing the people in your life, or are they influencing you? Just by and large. If you ask me, Evan, how do I tell? Well, I don't know. Here's one way that I think you can tell a bit. Pay attention to your speech and your mannerisms. Are those being passed along to the people around you, or are theirs being adopted by you? Because when you respect someone, when you are being influenced by them, you often adopt their mannerisms and the way they talk about stuff. Is the way that your coworkers talk about your boss, your work, their spouse, their kids, are you starting to adopt that? Or is the way that you talk about your spouse to honor them, the way that you talk about your kids, the privilege of losing your life for the sake of these little ones that you could give them life and advantage them? The way that you talk about challenges at work, is that beginning to influence the people around you, or is it the other way around? I found that to be kind of a nice little like litmus test. All right. So they were being influenced. It was totally backwards. Verse number 9. The sons of Israel did things secretly which were not right against the Lord their God. Whoa. This is a huge point of conviction for humans. How are you doing in the secret things in your heart and your mind when no one sees, no one knows, no one will ever know because it's in your mind or it's in your heart? How are you doing in those places? How's your thought life going? What are you spending your time thinking about? Is it pure? Is it honorable? Is it valuable in the kingdom? Or not? The decisions that you make, the tiny little decisions that you make when no one will ever know, is how you gain or you lose integrity. A lot of people think that what gives you respect to other people is how you are in front of others, what people can see in your life. And that's true to a degree. But I would argue that spiritually speaking, what we learn from the scriptures is that you want to build integrity, you want other people to want to long after the patterns of your life, you want them to respect you, to see something in you that's valuable, you work on the stuff that no one will ever know about. And that will give you the integrity that you really want in the world. It's this spiritual dynamic. So here we see a negative version of that where they were doing things secretly that were not right, and that eroded the kind of life that God intended for them to live. But the inverse is true, which is really good news. Why is this good news? Because it's possible for us. It's a manageable thing for you and I to be obedient in all those little small, tiny ways that God whispers to our heart. Maybe it's not the big old thing, but it's the tiny little thing that no one will ever know. And if you're faithful in those things, friend, you will be building up the life that God intended for you to live. Yeah, I won't belabor that. I do want you to think about it. I think you are. Can you sense in the room right now, everybody's like, whoa. So that's what conviction feels like. That's what you're sensing. And maybe it's not for you, but what you're sensing in the room is the conviction of the Holy Spirit. It's not heavy, but it's real. And it gets people to pause and start to consider and to realize. That's what godly conviction does. But you have to remember that as God brings us conviction, that there is forgiveness for the ways in which that we've fallen away. And then there's a hope that it can be different. So don't resist conviction, is what I'm trying to say. All right. Let's go on. Okay, so they did things secretly against the Lord their God. Moreover, they built for themselves high places in all their towns, from watchtower to fortified city. And they set for themselves sacred pillars and Asherim on every high hill and under every green tree. And there they burned incense in all the high places, as the nations did, which the Lord had carried away to exile before them. And they did evil things, provoking the Lord. And they served idols, concerning which the Lord had said to them, you shall not do this thing. Super clear. Don't do this thing. That's the thing that you did. That's exactly the thing that you did. The one that I said, don't do that. The first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. The very first one. They didn't even get to like 7. You know what I mean? Like just the first one, they did not do that. We've talked about this a lot over the last many weeks. I don't want to belabor the point. You got to understand something about me, like just personally. Doing something again, like repeating something, is like the bane of my existence. It takes every last ounce of me to review anything. I hate it. I never used erasers in school. I would just like make the word be the word that I needed it to be. You know, didn't erase the E when I meant it to be like a B. I just like, because I didn't want to stop the flow of the pencil stroke. Who could be bothered with those microseconds that I'll never get back? You know what I mean? So it takes a lot for me to review stuff, but I want to point out something in this particular section of verses that I found very beautiful. First of all, it's the observation of, look how many times it says every and all. Under every green tree, on every hill, in all the cities. That's how much the idolatry had spread. Now remember, where they ended up was not where they began. And it wasn't like an overnight thing. They weren't like, you know what? Tomorrow, any green tree out there, we're going to put an idol underneath it in 24 hours. It didn't happen like that. It happened slowly over time. Influence from without, unbridled wickedness from within, and it just spread like an infection throughout their whole body. So then when they were walking around everywhere, there was an idol everywhere, basically. You needed to sacrifice something. Oh, man, I forgot to do incense to whatever god. You could do it on the way to work because there were so many idols everywhere. That's how pervasive it was in their society. But look at this. Look at this. It's so beautiful. I hope I can explain this. Look at verse 13. Yet the Lord warned Israel and Judah through all his prophets and every seer, saying, turn from your evil ways and keep my commandments. Did you see the word every and all in there again? It's almost like God knows how much the infection has spread, and therefore he knows how to meet it in like kind. He didn't just send one prophet. He sent every prophet, all the seers, so many times. So many people he sent to help them turn around. I just see such beauty in how God responded to multiplied sin with multiplied warning, multiplied message. People didn't just make a mistake once and he's like, that's it. What? I can't even deal with you anymore. Forget it. No. Again and again and again and again. The message of grace, the message of you can turn around. I know it seems bad. I know this seems normal for you, but you really can get out of this. You can do it. Again and again, God sent them messenger after messenger, even though the infection had spread so far and so wide. Friend, you are not past the reach of God in whatever it is that you're struggling with. It might be so present in your mind, you can't keep your mind pure. You're out of control. And every time some attractive person walks around, you just go there. You can't keep it under control. Do you know who can help you, though? Is the Lord. And sometimes it takes us getting to that place where we finally come to terms with the fact that I am sick. I didn't think I was sick before. People told me there's a little bit of an infection. I didn't realize. But now that it's just everywhere, I realize it. I see it now. This is one of the reasons why I think it's so important that we would surround ourselves with loving and trustworthy people who can help us see the spread of the infection. I like the analogy of the tide. You know, if you go down to the beach and you just watch the ocean, it's kind of hard, just because of the way our brains work, to notice that the water goes out or comes in, because it happens so slowly. Like, it's real. It totally is happening. It just happens so slowly you don't really notice it. But if you go in the morning and then you come back in the afternoon when it was low tide and then high tide, it's very easy to notice, like, whoa, where'd all the water go? I can see the rocks now. So that's like the perspective that people have, because, you know, a disciple in your life doesn't follow you around 24/7, like looking at your life. I'm just waiting for that tide to go out, man. I know it's going to go out. I'm just waiting for it. It's a little weird, right? But you're meeting with them like once a month, maybe if things are crazy, once a week or once every other week, and they come back to your life and they're like, whoa, I can see the rocks now. That tells me that the water has gone out. So let's talk about that a little bit. That's the utility. You know what I mean when I say that? It means like that's what's useful about being in a body of believers, that you would totally invite, hey, if you see some rocks peeking out of my heart where there should be water covering them, tell me. Because sometimes I just don't know. I don't get how far the infection has spread, but thank God for people who can come in and say, look how far it is. And for a person, sometimes, I don't know if you've ever been in this situation, I got it under control, okay? Yeah, I know I got a little bit of an anger thing, but I got it under control. And then finally a discipler says, you know what, can I just make an observation? Every time you talk about work, you're always angry. You know, in the last 6 months, you've never said anything good about work. Always complaining or angry about something. And then I just noticed you started talking about your family like that. What's going on? And it just, conviction. Dawns on the person, oh my goodness, I don't want to be like that. I mean, I know I had a little bit of a problem, but now I see this has gone further than I ever imagined it would. I need help. Well, unfortunately, that's not what Israel did. Let's read about it in verse 14. God sent these messengers, but verse 14, however, they did not listen, but they stiffened their neck like their fathers, who did not believe in the Lord their God. They rejected his statutes and his covenant which he made with their fathers and his warnings with which he warned them. Okay, I want to try to explain something here. The process of a person's neck being stiffened, I actually think it's a very specific thing. It's not just like, I don't agree with you, whatever, I don't believe in that God stuff, get out of here. That's not what this is. This is a person, or in this case, a group of people, this is a person who, the more and more you give instruction, or you give correction, or you give warning to, the harder and harder and harder their neck becomes. So there's like a correlation between how much they're being corrected and the stiffness of their neck. If you stop the correction, it's like their neck gets stiffened to a point, but then it will stop. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Okay, so if that was true of these people, the more and more and more that God's like, turn around, don't do it, don't go there, it actually was making it worse because their neck was getting stiffened. And they were like preparing themselves for the discipline of the Lord such that it wouldn't break through. Do you understand now why God changed his tactic? Why he stopped sending them warnings and he just allowed the power of the Assyrians to introduce the consequence in their life? Because the warnings weren't doing anything. In fact, it was making it worse. Friends, this is such a sobering reality, but it is true that there might be somebody in your life and you've been trying to say, that's not right, this isn't right. At some point, it may be the best thing for them for you to not instruct them anymore and allow the ravages of the consequences of their decision play out in their life. Why? Why would that be good? Why would that be helpful? So that they could realize how sick they really are. This isn't the end of the story for Israel. What's the end of the story? John 3:16 is the end of the story. For God so loved the world, who was so broken and so sick, and he knew that they couldn't do it on their own, so he sent Jesus. That's where this story is going. But people will not receive Jesus if they don't know that they're sick. And sometimes warning will do it. Sometimes instruction will do it. But sometimes they need to experience what it's really like if God takes the protective covering of his hands off. And these powers who are all too eager to encroach upon their promised land come in, exile them, oppress them, for them to really realize how much they need the Lord. This isn't an unkind God. This isn't a tempestuous, temperamental, I'm just going to do whatever I want to do kind of God. This is a God with a plan, who, like a parent to an unruly child, knows I need my discipline to get through. And if this way of disciplining my child isn't really breaking their will and getting through to produce godly sorrow, godly remorse, like I get it now. That when I do those things, it hurts me inside and it hurts other people. I get it. If my way of disciplining them isn't getting through, you have to change tactics. You have to get through. Parents, if what you're doing isn't working, you got to change your tactic. You can't just let that develop in their lives because their neck will get stiffened. So you need to figure out a different way to go in and help them understand what is really going on. That's the privilege of being a parent. It's the privilege also, in a way, of being a pastor, of being an influencer in somebody's life, to really help them understand this is what's going on. It's totally your choice, and I'm not going to make the decision for you. But if you allow this rage that's just leaking out of you about work, about your family, if you allow that to leak out, you understand what's going on inside of you, right? It is violently ravaging your heart. And these kinds of biblical pictures of where a person ends up with these things left unchecked are hard to swallow sometimes. But guys, this is real. And we can help. All right. Much of that was review. Now let's get to the verse that I really wanted to talk about. This is not as much review, and this small little phrase, I underlined it, I starred it, and then I circled the star. In my little code in my Bible, that's like 3 levels of like, dude, pay attention to this one. All right, here it is. It's right in the middle of verse 15. And Israel followed vanity and became vain. That doesn't mean that they stood in front of the mirror for a really long time. Let me give you another translation. They followed after emptiness and became themselves empty. Okay, this is next level stuff here, all right? Not only has Israel lost the opportunity to be influential with the nations around them, not only are they not living with the bounty, the blessing, the overflow of the way that God had intended for our lives to live, but what we learn from this is that something was being hollowed out inside of them because the primary pursuit of their lives was after something that itself was empty. And they then adopted the primary characteristic of the thing that they pursued, they themselves became empty. It was hurting them by pursuing something that was empty. Whoa. What's the pursuit of your life? Is it after the things of the kingdom, the things that are really the rock, foundation, the solid, fulfilling things of God? Or is it after something that ultimately is empty? Because if you pursue those things, you will become the thing, like the thing that you worship. That's what it says in the Psalms. Now, what's incredible about this is that's universally true. Good, bad, or otherwise, it is universally true. The thing that you primarily pursue in your life, you will become like that thing. Now, what's great about that is you pursue the Lord and his kingdom, and the things that are true of God become true of you. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing. But if what you're pursuing in your life ultimately isn't the things of the kingdom, isn't the Lord, it's going to hollow you out. I mean, we talk about priorities. Last weekend we talked a lot about priorities, kind of where is God in the mix of the things in your life. But this is such a sobering statement of over years upon years, generation after generation, these people ended up pursuing things that didn't satisfy, and it hollowed them out. Hollowed them out. I think the thing that's so tricky about that is you could do it for 5 years and never feel the effects of it until later when you realize all is vanity, like Solomon said. It's just empty. And now, as a result, I am empty. What I've noticed is that when people are pursuing things that are empty in their lives, it reduces their capacity to pour out meaningful things into other people's lives. I mean, that makes sense, right? If you yourself are empty, you don't got anything to give. And it's almost like God is trying to pour into you, but you're poking holes in the bottom like a colander, and so all that stuff is leaking out, and it's not overflowing into the lives around you because you're pursuing emptiness. For me, I think what's a helpful way to think about this is, yes, I do believe that the overarching pursuit of my life is the Lord and the things of the kingdom. But if I'm honest, I get off track, like a lot. I love the line from that song that we sang, "My heart is prone to wander from the one that I love." That just describes me. That nails it on the head. I love you, Lord, but my heart is prone to wander, isn't it? And so the Lord just needs to help me course correct, every once in a while. And sometimes it's my pursuit. Evan, how do I know what I'm pursuing? I'll tell you a little bit, how I try to tell. What do you have a taste for? Like, what are you hungry for? And overall, your pursuit is to get promoted, to make a bunch of money in life. Your taste will be for money. And as I just read in Colossians, it says, "And greed, which is idolatry." If your hunger is to have other people approve of your life, then you're going to be pursuing those things. But if your pursuit is the Lord and his kingdom, then you will be filled with such a deep sense of satisfaction that whether you're rich, whether you got thousands of people who are your Twitter followers, it just won't matter because all those things will be settled as a byproduct of you being with Jesus. They followed vanity and became vain. Well, the rest of the verses talk about the things that they ended up ultimately getting involved in. Verse 17, they made their sons and daughters pass through fire. We've talked about that a lot. They practiced divination and enchantments and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him. So he was very angry with Israel, and he removed them from his sight, and none was left except the tribe of Judah. Remember, they didn't start out this way. How they ended up in a place where they could justify killing children to appease a God. How they could justify lying, murdering, taking advantage of the weak They didn't start there. It began the slow process. But the Lord sends us helpers so that we can shore up these things in our lives. And if there's one overarching message that I want to give you this morning, it's that pay attention to the small things. Pay attention to the small things. Because they're big things in disguise. God gives you a tiny little point of obedience. You might not understand the significance of it. But would you take these principles and at least acknowledge that small things will, not can, will lead one way or the other to big things? So if God's saying, dude, stop being a grump at work, smile a little bit, okay? I gave you mouth muscles, use them. And you're like, what's that really gonna do? He's addressing something in your heart, and maybe you don't realize how hollow you are inside with joy. So it's a bother to just smile. Trust me, almost all of you could use that word right now. Maybe God's telling you when you listen to a sermon, don't look angry. I don't know, maybe. I'm just throwing it out there. Oh, man. Okay. God is so merciful, even as he disciplines us. If you can really wrap your head around that God loves whom he disciplines. So if you're experiencing some discipline or consequence in your life, you're in the pocket of his love. Oh man, you're gonna be so free, because then you don't have to fight against it, and you would welcome the discipline of God and say, thank you that you would tell me that I'm so sick and that you're helping me do something about it. Thank you, Lord. I'm telling you, you will live your life on cloud 9, because it's like, great, God's correcting me again. Hallelujah. This is so good. Amen. He wants to correct you too. It's a great life to live. And he knows how we can take back possession of where the enemy has come in and taken away our land. We talk a lot about how the enemy would take advantage of us, and that is true. That even without our sin, the enemy can encroach upon our land. But something that sometimes is uncomfortable for people to acknowledge is actually my own sin caused me to live in a small place. But even if it's your fault, 100%, God can show you how to take back the land that you've been exiled from. Amen. Let's pray. Father, I thank you that you know how to deal with your children. What I mean by that is, Lord, you know when it's an appropriate time to simply comfort with a loving embrace. And you know also the time to discipline us, Lord, appropriately, so that we could be the people that you made us to be. And Lord, I pray that you would all help us to be aware of those small points of course corrections that you were introducing in our lives, believing that this is going to lead to not only our own benefit, but the benefit of the people around us. As your word says, when we pay close attention to ourselves and to what it is that we're teaching other people, that we ensure salvation for us and for them. But Lord, we acknowledge that this is your work. And even though we get to partner with you in it, this is ultimately your work. It's your salvation story. I pray, God, for land that has been lost in the lives of the people here, perhaps because of their own sin, perhaps because they've partnered with something that was not right, in the secret places, doing things which are not right. But Lord, I pray that you would help them begin the process of reclaiming what is still rightfully theirs, not because they've earned it, but because it's the inheritance that they have as a child of God, and that your calling and your giftings are irrevocable, can never be taken away. Hallelujah. Thank you, Lord, for your long suffering. Thank you for your patience, for your great love. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. Amen. All right. God bless you guys. Hey, remember, if you've been here for 2 years or less and you'd like to know more about our church, that you can go over there to the table. Sign up, please, so we know how many people to make lunch for. Lindsay and I were joking that we just missed the cut. 2 years and 1 month we've been here, so can't learn more about us. Anyway, we won't scrutinize too much, but you want to come and learn more about the church, you're a little bit newer, please come. It'll be a great time with Steve, and we'll see you then. Otherwise, bye-bye.